What's up, everybody? So this is Luis and you're watching DACA Medicine. So today we're going to be talking about how to apply to medical school as a DACA recipient. So let's get into it. Alright guys, so before I jump into all the advice for all those DACA recipients out there considering going into medicine, I'm going to give you a little bit of background about who I am. So my name's Luis Gonzalez and I, and I'm actually from Mexico. I grew up here in the US in Birmingham, Alabama, and I actually received my DACA status in high school. And I ended up going to Berea College, a small liberal arts school in Kentucky, where I majored in biochemistry. I then graduated from Berea last May and I took my MCAT soon after. And as a DACA recipient, I applied to medical school last year and I ended up getting into multiple schools, one of them being Miami Miller School of Medicine, where I will be attending medical school this fall. So I want to start by giving you some general advice. Applying to medical school as a DACA recipient is going to be so difficult. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. You have to make yourself the most competitive applicant that you can. And I say this because you're going to need a lot of scholarship and a lot of institutional help to get through medical school. Because the number one challenge in going to medical school as a DACA recipient is money. So remember, as a DACA recipient, you don't qualify for federal loans. And a lot of schools are kind of hesitant to accept you because of the precarious political situation that we're in. So I recommend making yourself as competitive as possible. So we gotta get those stats up. So the big ones being your GPA, your MCAT, your extracurriculars, and your essays. Another thing that's very important, as a DACA recipient, you're not just competing for an acceptance. You're competing for scholarships, institutional loans, and institutional help. Alright guys, so the last piece of general advice that I have for you guys is you're gonna need to learn how to ignore negativity. There's gonna be so many people that are gonna tell you that it's not possible, it's gonna be too hard, or there's not enough funding, blah, blah, blah. And you know what? In a way, they were kind of right. It wasn't easy. It wasn't straightforward. It was definitely a lot of contacting people, figuring out what to do here, what to do there. Like at the end of the day, you can't let all this negativity get to you. So don't let anyone tell you, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. If you want to do medicine, go for it. You're a DACA recipient, go for it. All right, so the next part is choosing which schools to apply to. So this is already difficult for all normal applicants. Adding on top, being a DACA recipient, this makes it even more difficult. And if you don't already know, as a DACA recipient, you aren't able to apply to a lot of medical schools. So if you Google what medical schools accept DACA students, you'll get probably two lists. The first one being from AAMC, which was released in 2018. This is a great document. It gives you a full list of a lot of schools that do accept DACA students. There's also another list on the Pomona College website. It gives you a list of schools that are not only DACA friendly, but undocumented friendly, which I think is a great resource to look into. Both of these lists are great starting points. So I would go ahead and go through this list and pick about 30 schools or so that you think are pretty good and that you would consider going to. So I recommend actually double checking on all those schools on the MSAR, the Medical School Admissions Requirements website on the AAMC. This website has a section where the schools give their position or their stance or policy on DACA applicants. And it'll give you a good idea of exactly how they feel about DACA recipients and how they treat them. So those three resources will give you a good idea of what schools you can actually apply to. And as you'll notice from these lists, it's usually, really liberal states like California, New York, and Illinois that are usually really helpful towards DACA students. So if you're in one of these states, I highly recommend looking into, other public funds like scholarships and grants and loans out there, because I've heard that there's a lot in California for DACA recipients. As I mentioned, I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. So as you can imagine, there was no funds, and in fact, all the schools in Alabama do not accept DACA. So it was never an option for me to apply there. So keep in mind, if you do come from a state that's, I don't want to say conservative or liberal, just a state that's not as DACA friendly, you will likely have to go out of state to pursue medicine. So I'll put a list of all the schools that I applied to down below so you have an idea what schools you can apply to if you are coming from a state that's not as DACA friendly. Alright guys, so when you're looking through those lists and you're trying to figure out what schools that you can apply to, there's basically going to be three types of schools. There's what I call the politician school, the cake you want but you can't have school, and the Goldilocks school. The first one being the politician school is a school that says, yeah, we love DACA students. Yeah, we're very open to them and we're DACA friendly. And then you contact them and they're like, yeah, we don't give any scholarships. We don't give any institutional loans or institutional aid. And they basically throw you in the water and say, you figure it out on your own. These type of schools, if you have something that I'll talk about more later, a citizen cosigner, these are a possibility for you. You can still apply to these. If you don't have a citizen cosigner, which again, I'll get into that later, you're kind of screwed because they will make you upfront have to pay tuition of like, $200,000 to $300,000. These schools are going to be thrown away. Just throw those guys out. So your trash is actually going to be pretty full with all these schools, because this probably makes up, if I had to guess, about half of all the schools that say they accept DACA students. So that leaves you with two other ones: the cake you want but you can't have schools, and the Goldilocks schools. So the cake you want but you can't have schools are the ones that you could apply to and you kind of want to apply to, but they're not exactly in your realm, if you know what I'm saying. So these are going to be schools that you can apply to for like more like personal reasons, stats reasons, or maybe like they only help in-state students and you're just not from their state. So that's the cake you want but you can't have schools. Then comes number 3, and that's your Goldilocks schools. So those are going to be the schools that you can apply to and you would like to go to, and they have good DACA friendly policies. They grant out a lot of scholarships and they give a lot of institutional loans. These are going to be the schools that you are going to love, and they're going to love you essentially if you have the good stats. I think this will end up being anywhere from 10 to 20 schools. I don't imagine that being a lot of schools unless you're from a very popular state like California, where they have like 5 schools that are really DACA friendly. So at the end of the day, I think it's very important for you to contact the school you're interested in and really figure out which of the 3 types of schools the schools fall into. So, figure out if it's that Goldilocks in the perfect, situation school, or if it's kind of like that politician school that you don't really want to mess with. Oh, another thing that's very important is do not waste your time emailing schools. Call them on the phone. I didn't realize this until like halfway through. They're so roundabout. Like you'll send them an email and they'll get back to you like in a week, and it's like not an adequate answer at all. So just go ahead and call them. If you call them on the phone, they'll usually connect you to someone that does know the answer. All right, so there's basically 2 types of DACA applicants. The first one being a DACA applicant that has someone that's a citizen with good credit and that is willing to co-sign, the cost of tuition, which could come out to be about $200,000 to $300,000. If you do have someone that's a citizen cosigner, your life is exponentially easier, because a lot of these schools like that I call the politician schools, they might be, possible for you. Even though they require you to have all those funds, before matriculation, you have a citizen cosigner, so you might be able to get those funds. All right, so number 2 is the DACA applicant that doesn't have a citizen cosigner, someone to, dish out and sign on $200,000 to $300,000, maybe $400,000. All right, so if you don't have that, welcome to the family. So basically with that is you really have to make sure, like I mentioned before, you make yourself very competitive and make sure schools love you so much that they find a way to make sure you can go to their school. And another big thing before I go is this is kind of like in the gray area, and if you find a school that is DACA friendly, they do give out scholarships to DACA students, but they don't exactly have enough scholarship funds, to cover you completely, or they say they only give a certain amount of scholarships out to each student, or if they don't give a lot of loans out or whatever it is, but they are DACA friendly and you think it's a great fit, I highly recommend applying to them and seeing how it goes. Because at the end of the day, you never know when scholarships will magically appear and all of a sudden you can go to school there. So if you really like the school and you think it's a great fit and it's very DACA friendly, I highly recommend applying to it. And at the end of the day, you can always apply for third-party scholarships that don't come from your school. And these scholarships are typically on the national level. So I highly recommend applying to these because you have a pretty good story and a pretty good reason to get the scholarships. And finally, the cliche part, don't give up. It's resilience is part of medicine. At the end of the day, you're a DACA recipient. You've gotten through college and you've applying to medical school now, and there's probably, I've heard a statistic, there's probably 100 DACA students out there applying a year. So don't let anything get you down, just keep going. Alright, you guys, so that's all I got for you guys today. Deuces. I hope you all enjoyed the video. I went through everything very briefly, so if you have any questions, feel free to comment and let me know. As usual, leave a like if you learned something and subscribe if you're interested in future content. Until next time, you guys.